Peace, peace. This your host, Selah Shalom, and this is the Cosmon Teachings in the words of Jehovah and his angel ambassadors from the Cosmon Bible, Owaspi. And the topic of discussion today is called, Who was Moses in Ancient Egypt? In order to find this out, we must go to the chronology of ancient Egypt. In the Bible, it doesn't give you a chronology, nor does it indicate what king was ruling at the time of Moses' birth. It just states Pharaoh. But the term Pharaoh in Egypt is Pra, meaning great house. During the Middle Kingdom, the term Pharaoh, Pra, didn't refer to a person, but the house or a building. But later in the New Kingdom, the term Pra, Pharaoh, took on the meaning referring to the person. But in the Bible in Owaspi, it gives certain events that took place which can correlate with events in ancient Egyptian records. In the Bible, it states Moses was raised in the house of Pharaoh, and was learnt in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was recognized as a stepson to Pharaoh, and a half-sister to Pharaoh's daughter. And in the Bible, in Owaspi, it makes it clear that the child was not a Kemite, but a Hebrew child. During the time of Moses, it speaks of plagues, and the migration of a mixed multitude of people leaving Egypt. So in order to verify these things, we must find evidence of these events in ancient Egyptian records. First, let me address the chronology errors in the Bible referring to the time period of the Hebrews in Kemet, or Egypt. Many people try to place the Exodus during the New Kingdom of Egypt, during the time of Ramses. But when we look at the events that took place during the time of Ramses, there is no evidence of a large migration, nor of any plagues, as mentioned in the Bible. So the time of Ramses wouldn't fit this time period. Then you have others, many Hebrew Israelites, say that Moses was Thutmoses III or fourth because of the term Moses. The name Thutmoses meaning thought is born. But when you compare the events, there is still no connection to plagues and a migration during the reign of any of the Thutmoses. So this is just a couple of errors referring to the time period of Moses and the Israelites in the Bible. But when we apply the time period mentioned in Owaspi, being the beginning of the 24th ark cycle after the creation of man, the coming of Moses, it begins at 1553 BC. This is the year that the earth entered into the 24th ark cycle and was considered the dawn of the ark cycle. And it is between the dawn of this cycle from 1553 BC to 1546 BC that the Etherian angels played a part in this exodus. It was these Etherians that did all of the miracles mentioned in the Bible. So when we apply this time period to the Kemetic or Egyptian chronology, this would place us in the Middle Kingdom during the 12th dynasty of Kemet. Moses wouldn't be his name at the time. He would have had an Egyptian name. And when you look at the rulers of the 12th dynasty, you will not find Moses' name. But what you will find is similarities of events to indicate who he would have been in the Kemetic records. Let's compare the events to pinpoint who Moses was in Egypt. First, let me state the chronology of ancient Egypt, Kemet, is off as well. You had kings who erased other kings' reign off the records. You had inconsistencies in the intermediate periods. The first intermediate period ran concurrent with the Old Kingdom, and the second intermediate period ran concurrent with the Middle Kingdom. So the ending of the Middle Kingdom and the beginning of the New Kingdom were concurrent with no gaps. So when Amos took the throne in 1546 BC, the Middle Kingdom ended, Amenemhet III being the last legitimate male ruler of the Middle Kingdom. So now we could piece together who was Moses. First, Moses was a stepson to Pharaoh. The only evidence of a Pharaoh fostering a son in the Middle Kingdom, 12th dynasty, was Amenemhet III. He only had a daughter by the name of Queen Sobeknefru, and he is the only pharaoh to have had a stepson from some unknown origin, as the records indicate that Amenemhet III didn't have a male son but a stepson, a co-regency, named Amenemhet IV. It is this Amenemhet IV that is Moses, and his half-sister being Sobeknefru. And being that the Egyptians dealt with idols, every pharaoh carved an idol of theirselves. So here you could see the face of Amenemhet IV, who would have been Moses, the Hebrew. Now, Amenemhet IV, Moses, served first as junior co-regent of Amenemhet III and completed the later temples at Medinet Ma'ada, which is the only intact temple still existent from the Middle Kingdom. The Turin Canon papyrus records a reign of 9 years, 3 months, and 27 days for Amenemhet IV, Moses, and in Owaspie it states he reigned 12 years, just a 3 years difference. Amenemhet IV, being Moses, would not have been buried with the 12 dynastic rulers, and there is no location for his body buried among the 12 dynastic rulers. He would have been laid to rest in the valley in the land of Moab, according to the Bible. According to a rock graffito in Nubia, his short reign was relatively peaceful and uneventful. Several dated expeditions were recorded at the Serabit el-Kadim mines in the Senya. The mines were worked by prisoners of war from Southwest Asia who presumably spoke a Southwest Shemitic language such as Canaanite that was ancestral to Phoenician and Hebrew. These expeditions in the Serabit el-Kadim by Amenemhet IV Moses is when he went among his people and experienced the Hebrews laboring in the mines. This would have been harsh conditions for these mine workers, who would have been the Hebrews. When you look at the Senyatic inscription at Serabit el-Kadim, you can see Hebrew letters inscriptions carved in stone. And also you have the Semitic inscription in Wadi el-Mukatab, Senya. The following is a translation of the inscription. The wind blowing, the sea dividing into parts, they pass over. The Hebrews flee through the sea. The sea is turned into dry land. The waters permitted and dismissed to flow, bursting, rushing unawares upon the astonishing men, congregated from quarters, banded together to slay treacherously, being lifted up with pride. The leader divideth asunder the sea, its waves roaring. The people entered and passed through the midst of the waters. Moses caused the people to haste, like a fleet winged she ostrich crying aloud. The cloud shining bright, a mighty army propelled into the Red Sea, is gathered into one. They go jumping and skipping, journeying through the open channel, taking flight from the face of the enemy. The surge of the sea is divided. The people flee. The tribes descend into the deep. The people enter the water. The people enter and penetrate through the mist. The people are filled with stupor and perturbation. Jehovah is the keeper and companion. Their enemies weep for the dead. The virgins are wailing. The sea flowing down overwhelmed them. The waters were let loose to flow again. The people depart fugitive. A mighty army is submerged in the deep sea, the only way of escape for the congregated people. And as you can clearly see, this inscription is clearly talking about the Exodus. So this is proof the Hebrews were in these regions during the 12th dynastic Middle Kingdom. And these were the regions where the Hebrews worked in the minefields. Archaeological excavations by Sir Flinders reveal the ancient mining camps and a long-lived temple of Hathor, the Egyptian goddess who was favored as a protector in the desert regions. This Hathor is where you find the Hebrew Israelites making the golden calf to worship in the desert, which was this goddess Hathor to protect them when they were in the desert, while Moses was absent, receiving instructions by the angel of the Creator. It states in the Bible that the Hebrews built temples with mud brick, and you can find proof of this in the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, where the pyramids of Amenemhet III were built with mud bricks. The pyramid of Lahan is made of mud brick, located in the Fayum of Egypt. The town layout by Flinders states compared the village to a Welsh mining village, where the workers lived in terraces in the village, while the mine owner and overseers lived in large houses up the hills. So here he is distinguishing where the Hebrew servants lived and where the taskmasters lived. Other records show that there were a large number of Shemitic slaves in Egypt during the 12th dynasty. It is interesting that some of the villages were constructed of layers of mud brick, separated by layers of reed matting, a technique used in Mesopotamia. Being that the Hebrews lived in Canaan, Syria, northern Mesopotamia, before entering Egypt, they would have brought their crafts and trades to Egypt when they entered at the beginning of the Middle Kingdom, 2000 BC. Being that the forefathers of the Hebrews are Akkadians, they too would have had knowledge of trades and crafts outside of Egypt. So here Flinders, the archaeological researcher, proves there were Hebrews in Egypt as servants. So the pharaohs that would have brought hardship to the Israelites would have been the rulers of the Middle Kingdom, especially the forefathers of Amenemhet III, which was Amenemhet I and II, and Senusret I, II, and III. Now we must identify the location of Amenemhet III Moses' stepfather, in order to know the location where Moses and the Israelites were. The place would have been Lower Kemet, or better yet North Africa, around Fayum and Hawara and Avris. And there is evidence of Hebrews in these regions under various other names, being that the Hebrews came into Egypt with a mixed multitude of people such as Hyksos, Asiatic, Hekakaswet, Shasu of Yahweh, sand dwellers, but these were names given by the Kemites. The people themselves didn't call themselves those names. The term Hyksos is Greek, and this time period predates Greek and cannot be applied to the Hebrews that were in Egypt in the Middle Kingdom. And the term Asiatic is a term the Kemites used to denote all people, not distinguishing what tribe of people, classifying them all as Asiatic, coming from Canaan, Syria, Mesopotamia. The Ebla tablets verify these people being in Canaan and Syria and Mesopotamia before coming into Egypt in 2000 BC. So prior to 2000 BC, the Hebrews were living in Canaan, Syria, Ebla, and there were civilizations going on. Another name the Kemites called the Hebrews, or the mixed multitude that came in, were Hekakaswet, which is a title just meaning foreign rulers, being from the regions of Canaan, Syria, Mesopotamia. So that really doesn't denote a nationality. The same location where the Hebrews lived before coming into Kemet during the Old Kingdom, and it is during the first intermediate period after the fall of the Old Kingdom that the Israelites, along with other nations, came into Kemet at the beginning of the Middle Kingdom, after the first intermediate period. And it is from this time that the Hebrews spent over 400 years sojourning in Egypt, between 2000 BC to 1546 BC. And here in the tomb of Khemenhotep II, you can see when the Hebrews entered Egypt and see them at work as servants in Egypt. And it is during the ending of the Middle Kingdom where you can find the plagues mentioned in the Bible and Owaspy, which were recorded in the ancient Apura papyrus, where it gives an account of the plagues. On the inscription going back to the Middle Kingdom 12th dynastic, during the so-called Second Intermediate Period, which was the transferring of the ending of the Middle Kingdom into the beginning of the New Kingdom. But during that transition is when the Exodus took place and the plagues came about. And on the papyrus it states, plagues is throughout the land, blood is everywhere. And Exodus 7:20, it states, all the waters there were in the river were turned to blood. Verification. Another one on the papyrus states, the river is blood. Men shrink from tasting human beings and thirst after water. Forsooth, gates, columns, and walls are consumed by fire. And in Exodus 7:24 it states, and all the Egyptians digged round about the river for water to drink, for they could not drink of the river. And then in Exodus 9:23 it states, and fire ran along upon the ground. So here's more verification from the papyrus and the Exodus in the Bible to prove these things. Here's another plague from the papyrus. The towns are all destroyed. He who placed his brother in the ground is everywhere. Exodus 12:30 it states, and Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants, and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. More verification. And then it states, all is ruin, years of noise, there is no end to noise. Forsooth, the children of princes are dashed against the walls. It is groaning that is throughout the land, mingled with lamentation. Great and small say, I wish I might die. I forsooth, the desert is throughout the land. The gnomes are laid waste. A foreign tribe from abroad has come to Egypt. Trees are destroyed. And then in Exodus 10:15, and there remain not any green thing in the trees or in the herbs of the field through all the land of Egypt. Exodus 9:31, and the flax and the barley was smitten, for the barley was in the air, and the flax was boiled. Behold, the fire has mounted up on high. Its burning gores forth against the enemies of the land. And then in Exodus it states, chapter 13, verse 21, and the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night. And here it is describing one of the spacecrafts that was hovering above Egypt and over the Israelites, which had a lot to do with this Exodus. More verification on these papyruses coinciding with Exodus. Another verse on the papyrus says, the land is not light, it's dark. Exodus 10:22 and 23. And there was a thick darkness in all the land of Egypt for 3 days. they saw not one another, neither rose any from his place for 3 days. And back to the papyrus, it states, all animals their hearts wept, cattle mourned. Behold, kettles are left to stray, and there is none to gather them together. Each man fetch for himself those that are branded with his name. And in Exodus it states, behold, the land of the Lord is upon thy cattle, which is in the field, upon the horses, upon the asses, upon the camels, upon the ox, upon the sheep. There shall be a very grievous mourning. So on this inscription, we can find evidence of these plagues that are mentioned in the Bible and Owaspy. These things took place during the ending of the Middle Kingdom, 12th dynasty, around 1546 BC. So the time the Israelites came into Egypt was around 2000 BC, the beginning of the Middle Kingdom, and left Egypt around 1546 BC, the ending of the Middle Kingdom, a period over 400 years. Moses would have been Amenemhet IV, the last male ruler of the 12th dynasty. It was Amenemhet IV, Moses, who led the exodus out of Egypt, known as the expulsion of the Hyksos by Egyptologists. And this is why the body of Amenemhet IV, Moses, is not found among the 12th dynastic rulers. Moses' stepfather would have been Amenemhet III, who allowed him to receive the wisdom of the Egyptians. And his half-sister would have been Sobeknephruu, who found him near the river Nile. So here is facts and evidence of the biblical Moses and the Hebrew Israelites' presence in Egypt during the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. And with that, I'd like to say peace and blessings and catch you on the next documentary called The Story of Moses. Shalom.